So let's go ahead also, if we could, and just mute ourselves if we're not talking. It'll just help. So the via negativa is some of the aspects of it that I just want to remind folks of include. Hold on a second here. Here we go. I'm having problems with my share screen today. These are some of the things. It's about befriending darkness. It's about letting go. It's about emptying and being emptied. It's about letting silence be silence. It's about letting pain be pain. It's about thinking, letting nothingness be nothingness. It is the way of the cross. And I love the quote, dare the darkness. It can come to us in a variety of different ways. Oftentimes it's things that are inflicted upon us. Nancy, I think, is really having the epitome of being and, experiencing the intense physical pain. And it can happen in grief and in loss, not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, the loss of our innocence. You can, what are some other things that you can think of that can be reasons for pain? Yeah, go ahead.
A loss of beliefs.
Loss of belief, yes.
Yeah.
Loss of belief. Mm-hmm.
Isolation, where we felt that a lot being cut off during this last couple of years. And I felt that when you said that we're going to have Easter service first time in person, I was like, yay, God, for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't had that in a while, to be able to worship together during this last period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bit of a loss there.
Yeah.
A loss of physical capabilities such as vision or mobility.
Yes. Yes.
And
Manny?
for a lot of people, it's unnamed. You can't name it.
Uh-huh.
It just is. There's a darkness that just creeps in, and it's just it can take you out from underneath in a matter of a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Manny said. I've heard multiple people say, I don't even know what I want, but I know I didn't get it. Whatever it is we need, there's a lot of us that we just, something is missing and we can't even put our finger on what. Right.
A loss of physical interaction like that caused by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And
the loss of touch.
Yeah, God, yeah.
I mean, for anybody who knows me, before COVID, what a hugger I am. And to only now, within the last few weeks, be able to, safely feel that I can, start hugging people again, right? The public health department said so, by the way. That's why
There's two people actually who spoke to this, but the loss of trust and the loss of
trust. Mm-hmm.
For those people who were sexually abused as children or physically abused or any of that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
I would say for the literal grief and loss, because my dad is in his end of life phase right now. We don't know how much longer we'll have him. And that couple that you just mentioned, that one of them passed. So there's been a lot of that literal grief and loss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. So I think it's really easy to bring to mind things that what are, if you will, the path of the path of suffering, the path of loss, the path of grief, and the path of letting go. And then sometimes there are the things that, if you will, kind of like happen to us, And then there are things that experiences that we go through that aren't because of a loss of, but it's the struggles, the wrestling with God, I call it. The wrestling with God to make life-changing decisions are also a part of the via negativa. We sometimes don't think about that, but when we're going through the process of, should I get this new job? Should I go to therapy? Should I leave this relationship? Should I get in this relationship? These are, so there are big times. Should I have a child? Should I not have a child? There's other times when we can find ourselves wrestling with God. And in those also are times that can be included and are included in what we would call the via negativa, the time of the letting go, the loss, the grief, etc. And the via negativa is, I believe, one of the biggest areas where we mess up societally and spiritually. And what I mean by that is there were times, there have been times, and you especially can go to indigenous cultures currently, and even our own faith, for those who are Christian, our own faith a while back, that had real rituals around helping people through times of suffering and loss and grief that we have lost. We don't have, and societally, we certainly don't have a lot of support. It was mentioned earlier in the check-in how important the community is, right? And we live in a world that is so incredibly disconnected, to one another, as well as providing opportunities. I call it the container for when we are in this place. For Christy, I'm personally, I'm grateful that you had a job where you could take time off, as much time as you needed. But most jobs, you lose your spouse, you get 3 days off, a week
Right.
if you're lucky. A week to process the loss of a spouse. We live in a culture that does not have a container for many of us to live in, right? And to live through these issues. The church itself has also, in my opinion, really taken, this is what the via negativa is, what I would also call the cross. It is a theology of the cross. We talked actually a lot about that in the cross and the lynching tree, for instance, right? What the cross was and still is for people in the African American community. And we talked a lot about the cross theology and how it can be a positive thing, as well as a negative, but how it can be a positive thing. The via negativa is, I believe, it is the way of the cross. I encourage people who are in a lot of pain to think about Holy Week. I think Holy Week is the epitome of our faith, from Thursday, which is the teachings of love and service, to the Garden in Gethsemane, to the cross, and Holy Saturday, which is healing, and Sunday, which is the resurrection. But if we can, that is one of the few things that the Christian faith has, in my opinion, that really helps to ritualize going through the dark night of the soul, right? And I think, and one of the reasons I think it's so important for us to be talking about it more and more, under whatever name, whether you want to talk about it by way of creation spirituality or via negative, but whatever name you want to put on it, I think it is incumbent upon us, especially as followers of Christ, to reclaim really the rituals and the tools and the teachings of how to work through and live through pain, suffering, loss, grief, letting go, struggling. Our faith is actually very, very rich in the tools and the teachings, but they've been lost, right? Pain has been turned into by many as a punishment. It's, well, if you lost, this was a theology, and it was a theology even in Jesus' time. If something bad happens to you, it's because of what somebody in your ancestry did 7 generations ago, right? You know, you're suffering the sins of those who came before you, right? You know, there is some truth in that, but not a lot. But you know, we look at if something bad happened, well, you didn't have enough faith, you didn't pray hard enough, right? How many have heard that, right? You know, the pain's happening because
Wasn't the belief like 7 generations, right?
7 generations,
7
right?
generations.
Yeah, 7 generations before and then after, exactly. And so, you know, pain and suffering has been packaged as you did something wrong, right?
Mhm.
You know, you did something wrong, so you're paying the price.
You deserve it.
Yeah, and that's stinking thinking. When I refer to stinking thinking and bad and toxic theology, that is exactly the type of thing that I'm referring to, right? So taking a look at all of this stuff in the container of creation spirituality will give us tools, right? And not the least of which is, and we've talked a lot about it, you all, most of you said it in your check-ins, is that if we can find a way to just be in it, not alone, and yes, in prayer, but in community. And somebody had said, you know, if somebody's praying, if somebody's in the hospital, actually, there's another part of who had mentioned the thing about when somebody's in the hospital and somebody prays for them, how they, Ed, yes. The other part of that is that is even if they don't know, people are praying for them. Studies have shown that if people, you know, their studies have shown that, you know, 100 people praying for, you know, say Nancy, and she doesn't know it, but 100 people praying for her, whereas not praying for the person in the bed next to them, you know, there's a higher probability that Nancy's going to get well quicker than the person next to her, because of focused energy, right? Focused energy, focused prayers, and healing prayers. So our faith and our life is not a Lone Ranger faith, and we are not to live a Lone Ranger life. There's a lot to be said about pull up by your bootstraps and you can do it and you can make it. But what we've lost culturally, I believe, in our country, especially, is we idolize the John Wayne, that archetype, if you will, and forget about the community, right? I mean, I could go on a lot of tangents about that, but it's one of the things that's really important, especially in this day and age, to bring together. I do believe that this is something that the queer community actually has worked on because they've had to, because a lot of folks in the LGBT community have been kicked out and pushed out by their families of origin. I think the queer community, especially of our generations, have really worked on creating family of choice. And we've seen how important it is to build community. And that is one of the huge things I think that got us through the era of AIDS, right? Not that it's gone, but I think we really, yeah, you know, here's my perception. Before, one of the things, while yes, we were coming together because the oppression that, you know, society was putting upon the LGBT community, the men and women's community didn't really come together. You know, the gay men's community and the lesbian community didn't really come together until AIDS hit really badly, right? And through that suffering, community was strengthened because we realized we couldn't even be alone, you know, because we were just replicating what mainline society told us to do. The dykes over here and the fags over here, right? You know, I mean, never the twain shall meet, you know, and what we out of that tragedy, we really realized, no, we've got to do the community, right? And I think that absolutely during this time and through all of the things that people are going through, whether it's been COVID or HIV, or whether it's, you know, a neck surgery, for God's sakes, you know, whether it's depression, whether it's whatever it is, grief, I think we're finding that the power of reaching out in community is one of the paramount things from our faith that we have intrinsically learned is what we need to do when we're in this place. Right? Some of the other stuff I want to this is a beautiful piece. I did not write this. I do not take credit for this, but I want to share this because I think that this is this also encapsulates the kind of the via negativa. A man found a cocoon of a butterfly, and one day a small opening appeared. He sat and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to force its body through the little hole. Then it seemed to stop making any progress, and it appeared as if it had gotten as far as it had and it could go no further. So then a man decided to help the butterfly. So he took a pair of scissors and snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The butterfly then emerged easily, but it had a swollen body and a small shriveled wings. See, the man continued to watch the butterfly because he expected that at any moment the wings would enlarge and expand to be able to support the body, which would contract in time. But neither happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of its life crawling around with a swollen body and shriveled wings. It never was able to fly. What the man in his kindness and haste did not understand was that the restricting cocoon and the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the tiny opening were God's way of forcing fluid from the body of the butterfly into its wings so that it would be ready for flight once it achieved its freedom from the cocoon. Sometimes struggles are exactly what we need in our life. And if God allowed us to go through our life without any obstacles, it would cripple us. We would not be as strong as what we could have been, and we could never fly. Now, does that mean we leave people alone? No, it means that we're the cocoon for other people, right? When someone is struggling, we can become the cocoon that can hold them, or conversely, other people can be the cocoon that holds us as we struggle and as we go through our stuff, so that we can emerge, but not alone. Does that make sense? Oftentimes the tendency is, because we don't like to see anybody suffer, is to fix it for somebody. And then what we do is end up, kind of hindering them. A dear friend of mine just recently is going through some big stuff. And I said, I can't fix this for you, honey. I can't fix it. I said, but I am going to hold space for you. I said, I'm gonna help be that container for you, so you can struggle and you can go through your stuff, and you're going to know you're not alone. We talked again today, and they said, so how you doing around it? They said, I know I'm not alone. Right. So do you see how there's a little bit of a difference? So what can we do spiritually when somebody else is struggling? We can be the cocoon that holds them, right? And when we're in that struggle, don't have somebody else fix us. Codependence, big task for us. Codas, right? Yeah, Manny, how many times you want to be snip it, right? You want to snip that cocoon for somebody else. We can't do it. But we're not supposed to abandon people either, right? Can't abandon people either. How does that resonate with folks?
It's like perfect timing. Like I can't even tell you perfect timing. I literally I was writing down the trans community during the AIDS crisis, that sort of thing, and I just watched today the last 2 episodes of Pose, and when the whole series is about like surviving through community.
Surviving what? Say it again.
The whole series is about surviving through community. Yeah. Because there was, the Black transgender community back in the 80s and 90s, were being, they were being decimated by their homelessness and their families and just the whole thing. And God, I gotta tell you, those last couple of episodes, man, oh man, I just was so blown away by it, just just that very notion of everything that you just said is like, at that end scene where she's talking to these young, just starting out in the ballroom kids standing outside, like what's the deal with my guy? We worked so hard and we didn't get any trophies, la 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 la. And she turned around and she gave it to them the way Pray Tell gave it to her and her friends at the beginning, in a loving kind of way, and said, you know what, you just keep coming back and you stick close and you keep trying, and like, you know what, and if you keep trying and you stick with us, we will support you and you will thrive. You will be like us. And that's just truth all the way through. And I got to tell you that this, I had an experience today that I forgot to share real quick. Was, all this darkness was happening, and I got a phone call from the Gay and Lesbian Center. And I didn't answer the call at first, and I was like, oh wait, that's a 993 number. That's Gay and Lesbian Center. So I called back, which this never happens. You call back, you usually get like, the hello, this is and it was like, hi, this is so-and-so. And I was like, hi. And he said, are you still interested in therapy?
Wow.
I was put on a list 5 years ago. 5 years ago to get back on therapy, because I had gone through lots of therapy, which
I remember that.
really was like how I got sober, was the introduction to sobriety. And today, feeling as dark as I was feeling, I just watched that Post episode. And, to Deb's point, it was just like, just hand it over. That's what I've been doing for the last 17 years, just handing it over, and all the darkness and all those sort of things, just keep giving it to God. And, my response will always say, like, you know what, have you invited God into the process? You know what, it's like, just ask him to cover it, ask God to cover it. And he was like, okay, he was like, oh, well, so like, you know what, who would you like? Would you like a man or a woman? Would you like, I was like, I'd like an older man. Great. It's like, how's tomorrow? It's like, what? Yeah. I mean, it was nothing short of a miracle.
Wow.
It was like the best birthday gift I could have been given. And like, and it is, it's like, when we see dividends, you stay in faith and know that, like, yes, our community is there. Yeah. It's just too easy to get jaded by watching the news and everything else. But like, you know what, if you connect to a community, any community, like, it will be there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else? No. So some of the other aspects, thank you, Manny. That's a beautiful. And the thing that you also said is you also stayed present, right? You stayed present because one of the things that if we can put all of the crap in a container, right? In a spiritual container, no matter what, whether it's the war right now, whether it's Nancy's pain, whether it's the darkness that you're experiencing, whatever it is, if we can allow ourselves to put it in a spiritual container, spiritual perspective, if you will, one of the things that the path of suffering, if you will, teaches us to be present. There was a very interesting quote. So Matthew Fox, this is in one of the handouts that I sent to you. He does daily meditations, and he's done a few on the negativa and the war. And one of the things that he talked about is, he said, let me see if I can find it. He said that he says another lesson we learn from pain is that of the cosmos itself. Our pain feels as big as the cosmos when our hearts break, but we can give our pain back to the cosmos and to Father Sky and to Mother Earth. Both are so vast that they can welcome our pain. But Meister Eckhart also says we think eternally from letting go to letting go into the one. Letting go never ends. It is a continuous element to living, but it takes us to the depths or ground where God dwells. And if we fail to learn to let go, the result is neurosis. And the person who's neurotic never tastes the now. When we don't let it go, we go crazy. And when we're in that mindset, we cannot stay in the now. And the really important thing about this whole process is that we stay present so that we can receive, whether it is from other people, whether it's from the divine, whether it's from our prayer life, whether it's making the decision finally, like Deb saying, I've carried. I think beginning with that, Deb, was so like such a beautiful example to this, is like, I literally have carried this pain long enough, right? You carried it long enough and you decided to let it go where it belonged, which was in the dumpster, right? And I think that that's a perfect example of this process. I mean, I think that there is no better example of this than that. Okay. Yes, Ed.
You know, one of the things about Easter is I believe that Christ is saying, hey, you can come out of your tomb, Ed.
Yeah.
You can come out of your tomb. And
Mhm.
often I find myself going, oh no, I've decorated this tomb. It looks really nice. I've hung some artwork. I don't want to go out. I've made a nice little comfy place. It's like, I need to get out of that comfortable place, like that butterfly,
Mhm.
to go on
Mhm.
to the next evolution.
Right. Exactly.
And I wanted to say that ever since you said, Deb, that it exploded, like when you threw it in there, all I could think was that's all your power, like all the power that which you use to like eliminate that, to physically like throw it and get it as far away from you as possible. And that was the image that I got when I heard you say that. That's how I saw that explosion, was like, that's a manifestation of your power.
And I could hardly carry that tote. It was so heavy.
Mhm.
But yet when I got to the dumpster, I literally just went like this and
Mhm.
let it go.
Mhm. Mhm.
I wouldn't
It's
have
a-
had the strength to do that by myself.
Right.
It's such an amazing example, and that's why I acknowledged it earlier. It's an amazing example of a saying that we use in 12-step, and I'm sure you've all heard it here because people use it otherwise, and that's that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, how long do we carry our file
Right.
around with us that we didn't need to? You know, how long, like, you know, how long am I, like, you know, I use the example, and I think I've talked about it in here, maybe just in Lunch Bunch, that like forever I had this broken can opener that like we just wouldn't get the cans open, you know, and it was like one of these things, and every time I had to open a can, it was just like my fingers were blistering and it was like a mess, right? For $12, I could get an electric can opener and open it up. But I tell you that I had that stupid can opener for like, I can't even tell you, like 8 years. I did this for 8 years. Not that I opened so many cans, but like that was like pure optional for me. I was suffering that every time when, like, you know what, it was like I didn't have to, right? So we don't have to carry it around.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I like what Deb said. She couldn't do it alone.
Mhm.
You know, Pat, I love the term you mentioned, container, holding space, cauldron. Sometimes the wounding is beyond the psyche of an individual.
Yes.
And we need that container. We need something larger. It could be belief in God. It could be family, but we need, the individual needs something that the individual can't face it because it's so horrid.
Right.
We need a larger thing that everyone, it's like singing happy birthday or everybody saying, good going, Deb. You know, it's all of us collectively saying we are here.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that that Matthew Fox had written about the Via Negativa and the war right now, I thought was it goes right in to what you're saying, John, when we find it and share it, because it talks about, I'll just share it here. It's so in going through the Via Negativa, it brings out the worst and it brings out the best For instance, Howard Thurman, who's an amazing African-American theologian who I've spoken about before, he was one of Martin Luther King's mentors, by the way. Howard Thurman talks frequently about how our spiritual journey is about becoming stripped to our literal substance before God. Often war and other crises do that to people. It strips us to the literal substance of ourselves before God. We become who we truly are or commit to being. From war, there emerges the best and worst. In the former category, we see cooperation and, on occasion, true generosity and authentic sacrifice and courage. People forget themselves for others and for the sake of a larger and greater good. Bravery and courage are on display. Consider the brave people of Ukraine being led by a courageous president and courageously doing their best to protect their children, even when it means fleeing the country amidst much chaos and uncertainty. Consider the courage of those who stay behind to fight even when the odds in the short run are not with them. Consider the bravery of the journalists who dare much to give us the reality of what is taking place on the ground, and the bravery of Russian people who dare arrest by protesting such an unjust and savage war, and the willingness of other countries to break ties with Putin's Russia so that he will forfeit the financial means to maintain his war and or the future of occupying a country. Consider those helping one another, the young and the aged and the sick, and even the animals who are suffering and brave grave dangers to do so. Many are also making sacrifices such as boycotting businesses and products associated with Russia or putting up with higher prices of food and gas, all in order to stand with Ukraine. Sometimes it takes a breakdown for a breakthrough. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes it takes a breakdown for a breakthrough to happen, for the best of ourselves to step up. We learn who we are and what is truly the literal substance of ourselves before God. We learn who we are and what is truly the literal substance of ourselves before God. We learn what Meister Eckhart teaches about breakthrough, that we and God are one. Manny, you're muted. Powerful, huh? So, you know, we're even talking about this in the midst of a literal war going on right now, and think about the times in our lives when you know everything has been stripped away, right? And we, you know, we really are left at our essence of who we are. And the question is, who is that, right? Who is it that shows up? And in times such as this, the war, it's bringing out. We talked a lot about this is a tie-in to last week. Remember when we talked about how awe and wonder can give us the hope and the strength that we need when we're dealing in and with the negativa, the life of suffering, right? It's in all of this suffering, we're seeing people step up over and over and over again to help out. Okay? And so how about any of you? Can any of you think of a time when you had to break down and out of that got a breakthrough?
I don't know if this is quite the same thing, but when I moved from Missouri to California, the reason that I moved is because the plant where I worked shut down. And I no longer had a job at that location. So fortunately, I was given a transfer to the mother plant in Canoga Park for Rocketdyne. And that was a blessing in itself, is that I still had employment. It was also a blessing that I got to move from the Bible Belt Midwest and very narrow-minded people to the land of the fruits and the nuts in California. And that was a blessing. But one of the interesting things was, even though I got a transfer, my wages were still on Missouri scale wages, but with a California cost of living. And so by the by having to deal with the negativity of not having enough money to pay my bills, it forced me to actually go out and get another job, which I actually kind of enjoyed it. But it was the dealing with that was the breakthrough. And we were talking about the different types of loss. And I didn't mention it before, but it just dawned on me, loss of independence. When I had to give up driving, that threw me into a totally different world. No longer could I run out to the car and go to the store and pick up groceries. No longer could I go to the car and run out to a fast food place and get a sandwich. But it also then caused me to learn how many different things are available through delivery, like DoorDash, and to find other ways of getting done what I needed to have done. So again, that was a sort of a breakdown and a breakthrough.
Exactly. You know, for myself, you know, there was a period of time where I was unceremoniously let go. And, you know, life as I knew it was just like, you know, just thrown in disarray and blah, 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 blah. It was a horrible couple of years. And not that I'd wanted to go through it again. And a lot of amazing, amazing, amazing things came out of that, because I was forced out of my comfort zone, which in all honesty was a comfort zone that I was not leaving. I wasn't leaving because I had every rationale in the world to stay there, and it stunted me for who I am, right? You know, and so being forced into, you know, at the time for me, it felt like the depths of hell. What a complete and total stripping away of everything really allowed me to just, and I've said this before, everything was taken away from me. And other stuff had happened. My mom passed away, and, you know, going through a horrible breakup, blah, blah, blah. Everything was taken away except God. And that's what I realized out of that. I realized that everything could be taken away, but God was still there. And that realization was my breakthrough. And I don't regret that at all. I don't regret that at all. One other example somebody might want to share. Christy?
I was, how old was I? I was 27. I lost my job, and my girlfriend broke up with me in the same weekend. And I was a mess. And I called the Gay and Lesbian Center, and they put me in touch with the therapist, who actually came in on a Saturday, which she never did. And she saw me and became my therapist for, I like to say she was driving in a Isuzu when I started seeing her, and she drove a Jag when I was done. But she saved my life in so many ways. And I had no idea that Judaism and Jewish culture was so similar to Mexican culture. And that was interesting for me to learn. But I also got my job at the Gay and Lesbian Center as a result of working with her. So that it changed my whole life. I mean, for 20 years into the future, having that thing happen, actually longer, because that's where I met Celia. So it set me on a path that would have never happened. And all of the things that broke needed to be broken. And you're right, I would have never, ever done it myself because I was comfortable, or I thought I was comfortable. Actually, I didn't like it, but I wasn't miserable enough to do anything about it.
Right.
And that, you know, that combination of everything all at the same time was overwhelming, and I survived it.
Yeah. And came out of it blessed, right? You know?
Yes. Hey, I
yeah.
got the blessing of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that is the part, that's the awe and wonder, right? That's the part to hold on to, so that next time we go into the, you know, the field of poop, you know, what's that old saying, you know, when you're just buried in poop, you know, I love that thing. There must be a pony in here somewhere, right? You guys have heard that one, right? You know, little kids, and this little kid fell in the little kids in a pile of poop, in a pit full of poop, and they're going, what are you doing in there? Well, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere, right? You know, all that poop, there's got to be a pony. There's got to be a pony in here somewhere, right? You know, so if we can have our minds on that, right? Well, I want to cover one other aspect of the via negativa, and saying that there's a whole bunch more. I do want, if you do have time to read any of the stuff that I send out, I was able to, the things that I sent this week are really, really rich. And I have to say, the Master Eckhart, I had forgotten about it. That essay, it's pretty good if I say so myself. But it really does talk about the different ways of having the via negativa, you know, happen in our lives. But one of the ones, and this is I also feel is important to remember, is the spiritual suffering and what can happen when we are in that spiritual grief, if you will. This is where ensuring that we can frame this, when this happens in our life, with God infused in it, things can turn out better. So one of the things is that a lot of people are spiritually crippled and unable to grow, transform, or let alone fly, going back to that the cocoon story. We, unfortunately, when bad stuff happens, we will blame it on God, right? There's a quote I'm looking for in here. There was somebody, I can't quite, well, I'll tell you the story. So I met somebody came to me for pastoral counseling some time ago, in the chief, and she came to me, she had endured 5 years of just insurmountable loss. It was just about every significant person in her life died, one after another. Parents, siblings, lovers, lots of jobs. I mean, by the time she was done talking, I was like, you know, I was like, oh my God, you know, I mean, my heart was just broken. But she said, one of the reasons she came to me, she said, the God who I know is too small to handle this. I feel like the God that I have been taught about is in a tiny box. And I can't tap into what I have learned about God to be able to help me in this situation. So one of the reasons she came to me was to talk about this. Like, do I have any ideas? And I said, well, let's destroy the box as one, right? Because, and this goes back to, there is a huge price to pay. There's a huge price to pay when we just continue to put God in a box. And that is when there is great pain and loss in our lives, the God we've created can't handle it, right? Or we blame that entity, right? Or we leave church, you know, all that stuff. And one of the things that we need to do is to, you know, how do we deal with the pain and suffering? And that is to realize that God is so much bigger than any of this, right? Somebody was in something that was written, is something that I read about the cosmos a few minutes ago, right? You know, when we're in this pain and suffering, to think about the cosmos, to think about Father Sky and Mother Earth, right? That the earth and the universe is large enough to hold our pain, right? And if we can see that creation is the divine, right? There is something larger to hold all of our stuff. I was interviewed this last week. They're going to be there on Sunday to do more and to take pictures and all that stuff. But the reason they wanted to talk to me is were affiliated with Interfaith Power and Light, and they wanted to talk to a church and a pastor who, you know, creation is central to our faith, right? And I'm like, well, hey, we're the right place to come to. And what I talked to her about was, for me, when I was young, I would go to the ocean because we had a place near the ocean, and I would go to the ocean to sit and to see and experience the waves and the sound of the ocean, and realize, because when I did, it didn't matter how catastrophic my problems were. The ocean for me was the divine, was mama, was the great mama who could hold all of my pain. And that put it into a huge perspective for me. When I moved to New Mexico, I felt a huge loss because the ocean, hey, look, I'm surrounded by 1,000 miles of dirt. However, I was driving to the Jemez. Devil know what this is. It's a pueblo that's north of Albuquerque. And as I was on the I-5 driving north, I looked around and I realized that Father Sky was as large as Mother Ocean. And because see, we don't have that experience here in Los Angeles, or in my case, in the Bay Area. When we look at the sky, we see buildings and smog and grossness. Well, you're on the I-5 in the middle of New Mexico. You just look around, and it's a 360 vista. That it was the second time that I realized that the earth, the universe, there's another place that was large enough to hold all of my stuff, right? So it's one of the things that's important for us when we're going through this is to realize that our God, if you will, is so much more than like the big white guy in the sky, you know, the long beard and robe, you know, taking notes, right? You know, the divine is so much bigger. And when we realize that, then our faith can be a healer and not something that is detrimental to our growth. I shared this with you. God is not an entity removed from our experiences located out there, but very present and all around us, within us, below us, above us, surrounding us. God is a present God, one that washes through all, never abandoning us in our pain, but holding us in our pain. That's where you and I become the hands and feet and heart of Christ, when we can be there to literally hold people sometimes. This is a much different vision than the removed patriarch that I just talked about, who doles out pain and punishment for some transgression committed. Meister Eckhart reminds us that suffering, instead of alienating us from God because we did something wrong, can actually bring us to the place of moving from God to God essence. In other words, if we allow ourselves to fully experience all the joys and the disappointments of life, we allow ourselves to struggle against our obstacles. And if we breathe through the pain and challenging situations, we can find that surrendering to the situation, surrendering to the spirit, will not only ease the situation, it would also bring us to an even more fulfilling and deeper relationship with the divine. There is no way to let go of suffering. However, pain clung to is pain that is doubled. Turn your back on the last 40 marks, Eckhart advises, and concentrate on the 60 and look at them face to face and talk to them. In the days of pain, forget not the days of goodness. In the midst of pain, never lose sight of the good, never lose sight of God. A side benefit of attempting to operate from this perspective is that if one never loses sight of God, one does not feel abandoned. So those are some. So does this help in kind of reframing the crap in life, or how to go through that? Ed, Ed, go ahead.
Thank you so much for mentioning about looking at Father Sky too, because I've been looking at a lot of pictures of nature as something I feel like has been bringing me closer to God lately.
Mhm.
And looking at there's some websites that they show these tremendous I mean, from outer space nebulas that are all kinds of colors and patterns and shapes,
Mhm.
and just seeing the
Mhm.
vastness of God has kind of connected me to that. And I
Yeah.
was reminded of a shamanic prayer. It says, listen to the wind, it speaks. Listen to the rocks, they speak. Listen to the
Mhm.
water, it speaks. Listen to the
Mhm.
fire, it speaks. Listen to the
Mhm.
earth, it speaks. And
Mhm.
on like that. And it's
Right.
like there's something about I've noticed, because I was getting up and I was just in my daily gratitude journal. I was just
Mhm.
listening to the birds and I just felt so blessed just listening to these birds.
Mhm.
I had to get up, and I normally get up and I'm in a yucky mood until I have my coffee and all this. But instead, I don't have to get up that way. I could just say,
Mhm.
thank you, God, for the birds. And I could just start my day in a better place. And I noticed my day went better.
Right.
And there's something that shifts when we do really listen.
Mhm.
So
And you're
I'm just
allowing yourself to be present in the moment. And when you are, you're hearing, oh my goodness, the songs of birds. Mhm. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna keep the teachings for tonight at this, because if not, we could go on for hours and hours and hours. But I hope that I help to we in our teachings and conversation that we understand that allowing pain to be pain, it just is. It's not to be done alone. We are to be the cocoon for others and allow ourselves to be in the cocoon if we have to, and to in that work through moving through the pain for when we do, blessings are abundant. And that in the pain and in the suffering and in the grief, it also brings us to a breakdown, which brings us to a breakthrough. None of these things are entities in and of themselves. It's not like the via negativa here and the positiva here, and this is where, as we talked about last week, it's a both and where one can influence another and or can go the other direction. So, any last thoughts or questions before we bring this time to a close?
just got word my dad made it through his surgery. So yay, God.
Yay, I saw that. Yay. Any other insights, sir?
I have a lot of thoughts, but then I say, shut up and just go with the feeling.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I just want to thank everyone for being my cocoon, because you all have been.
Mhm. Good. That'll be our new mantra. Be the cocoon.
Even
That's right. That's right. I'm gonna see if I can find something that is there any last things, and then if not, I'm gonna close with a closing. Okay. I wanna close with this. It's a visualization that I've used, and you'll see it actually. By the way, you will have, in some of what I sent out is like, this is the course for, because in my dissertation, I developed courses to teach this, right? And which is not what you're getting tonight, but it has some good points. That's why I sent it. But one of the things that I've used as a visualization in talking about this is something that I want to close with. And that is, if you imagine that you've fallen into a deep cavern, and everywhere you look, you can't see a way out of where you're at. And you feel fear, abandonment, despair, and you cry out, where are you? Where's God? And out of the corner of your eye, you see a golden cord making its way to you from somewhere above. And no words are spoken. However, you hear the words of comfort within your heart. You're beckoned to grab a hold of this cord and let the powers that be pull you up. And if you're not ready to ascend, that's okay. But just hold tightly to the cord and know that you are no longer alone. And when you are ready, you will be able to find your way home, for this golden cord connects your heart to God. And I'll end with this that we've all heard before. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. And just be. Amen.